Today we're going to talk about a very special lens. It's the 50mm f1.8 STM from Canon. Now this is one of the most cheap Canon lenses you can buy, used or new, but don't get fooled by its low price. It is one of the best lenses out there. If it had slightly 5% better optics and a red ring around it, people would willingly pay L glass money for it. It's that good. I own some of the most expensive and well-engineered Canon L glass like this 135mm f2L and the 100mm f2.8L macro, and in many situations the 50mm STM would outperform this, especially in low light. What makes it so special is the low amount of glass it has, but a very wide aperture of f1.8. The longer the focal length, the more glass light has to pass through to get to the sensor, and 50mm just wins it here, being just 50mm and having relatively a small amount of glass elements, but the sizes are comparatively bigger. So that's why 50mm in many ways is much better in low light than other focal lens. Canon has periodically updated this lens, and compared to the old 50mm f1.8 II, it has a metal mount which now fits rock solid with my 5D, and judging by the size of the rear and front element, I think it's a T2.0 lens, which is very good for such a compact size. Now let's talk about size. This lens is very lightweight, and if you have a large Canon full frame body like mine, such as the 5D, this lens poses no additional strain on your hands, which means you can hold the lens steadier and have an all-day carry-on lens, and I personally think it looks great. Let me tell you the meaning of this lens. Think of this as a great autofocus capable, sharp, large aperture, low cost lens that you can keep, and no matter what gear you sell, this lens is so capable at enabling you to take photographs that you will never need to sell this and always have this one lens no matter what other lenses changes in your camera bag. Another middle ground is that you can use this lens for street photography regardless if you are on a full frame or crop sensor. The subject isolation and micro contrast details are on point, and if you have enough patience, you can get some great detail in your photos. Where it shines though is its close focusing distance of about a feet. This lets you get up close to subject and have a great bokeh in your background. The focus ring on this is more or less smooth but a bit small for my hands. The lens does extend and retracts, so every time you put this back in your bag, you have to make sure it's all the way retracted. This is a lens you have to handle with some level of care. I will talk more about it at the end of the video and how to keep this lens in pristine condition. The micro contrast details and the sharpness you get combined with the close focus distance, allowing me to make my own desktop or wallpaper, is one of the reasons I really love this lens. It allows me to take sharp detailed pictures with low ISO. Being one of the cheapest lenses in the Canon lineup, this gets lots of abuse from beginner photographers, and that leads to slightly shifted elements where focus is never on the right spot. Dust clogged focus rings and hair strands on the lens elements means it was too much in the open, and also badly serviced ones with extreme amount of chromatic aberration. 95% of all these bad apples end up on the used market to be shuffled around, so better to buy this lens new since it's very cheap in the first place. One of the reasons this lens is a must-have is its autofocus speed. Since the glasses are not heavy and there is not much element to move around, the focus speed on this is on par with some of the best L glass lenses out there. Even in almost total darkness, my 5D's center focus was able to lock on and find focus because of the large aperture, and there is never a focus hunting issue with this lens. Compared to my adapted vintage manual focus lens, it's almost the same size and has to be a bit bigger since it has to accommodate an autofocus motor in it. If you compare sizes, this is slightly larger than the 40mm f2.8 but not by much to make any difference, and if you have this lens, I really think you don't need the 40mm because this lens will outperform the 40mm in sharpness edge to edge at f2.8 and say up to f2.2. And looking at the back elements, the Yashica manual vintage lens has a slightly bigger back element than this one, but then again this one is more modern and has a better design, but it almost the same size. I'm showing you this to show you how much Canon has improved this lens over the years, that it has turned into almost the same size as a manual focus lens with autofocus motor in it. And to be fair, it looks really great and mounts perfectly without any wiggle room with your camera. Now the 50mm f1.4 is less sharp than this lens. It's 3 times the price and has almost the same bokeh quality as this. not enough to be noticeable in real-world usage. Also remember, the 50mm f1.4 USM hasn't seen an upgrade from year 1993. One of the reasons, and it's no secret, that the 50mm f1.8 STM sells like hotcakes for Canon, it's that it's the first choice for beginner photographers after their disappointment with their 18-55 kit lens. Therefore, Canon will keep updating the f1.8 variant and also keep it cheap, because the higher the price, the affordability goes down, along with your profit margin from bulk sales. I mean, this lens was made in Malaysia. The more expensive and much more quality controlled lenses are made in Japan. So does this mean this lens is bad in any way? No. It means this: I have used 7 of these lenses, and each lens will have a varying degree and angle to the color and minor chromatic aberration it produces. This means the quality control on this lens had much more wider tolerances. For example, the picture on the left is f1.8 and the picture on the right is at f4. So obviously at f4 the chromatic aberration is almost gone and it's much more sharp. This simply means that the factory of these f1.8 lenses had wider tolerances due to high volume production. My advice is to buy this new, and if you are going to buy this used, make sure to zoom to 100% to find one with the least amount of these issues. This gap is being utilized by third-party manufacturers as Sigma. Now let's talk about low light. When the sun goes down, this lens can really become a different animal. Even with my 5D with its maximum native ISO of 1600, I never have to go beyond ISO 1200. If I keep the aperture at f1.8 to f2.2, in low light it really captures details in shadows. If you are shooting raw, you will be surprised at how well this lens delivers textures to the sensor, giving your pictures life and soul in the process. Also, it captures details in highlights very well. That's one of the advantages of having a large aperture, and f1.8 is large enough and the bokeh is good enough. On my channel you will find reviews of f1.2 lenses, but the bokeh on those are so razor thin they are virtually unusable for general purpose photography. This on the other hand is great for portraits, product photography, weddings, events, and even making backgrounds and wallpapers for your phone and computers, like I am doing here. This lens is so great. I have 2 copies of this, always on my 5D and also adapted to my Fuji X-T20. Compared to the new RF 50mm f1.8, the quality of the image is virtually identical. For video using manual focus, this lens can be a hidden gem, even if you use it on a low-end Canon body like the 1300D. If you have a newer Canon body with digital image stabilization such as the Canon 77D, this lens would be a great choice for cinematic shots of weddings or making B-rolls. Ask any photographer and he'll tell you how good this lens is. It's so good that I sold my 85mm f1.8 lens and 40mm f2.8 pancake lens. This lens can cover it all. Every time I think about carrying my 5D outside, I always want it to be lightweight and not have to worry about it. This lens achieves that, and that is why I use it exclusively with my 5D. 80% of the time, it's that versatility and portability that wins in the end. If you like the content, please subscribe to my small channel and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you.